The Final Destination series took an ingenious idea and beat it into the ground over the course of 5 films. Based off of an unproduced X-Files script, Final Destination plays around with big, heady ideas like death, fate, and the unrelenting weight of our own mortality. The first film, written and directed by James Wong, took this idea of cheating death and ran with it. The film follows several survivors of a plane crash, a group of high school students who were ushered off of a plane before it exploded thanks to a premonition from one of the students. All seems well and good until only a month after each student and teacher who was supposed to die on that plane ends up losing their life in different bizarre accidental ways. They cheated death, but only for so long. They were supposed to die, and now death has come to take what is owed to him. It's a fantastic premise that worked well enough for this cheesy 2000s movie, but quickly devolved into a string of sequels that were only memorable for the ludicrous kills and over-the-top gore. The series ended in 2011 with Final Destination 5, a prequel of sorts that brought the entire series full circle. Each entry was worse than the last, but Hollywood, in their endless search of resurrecting slightly nostalgic IPs, have decided to continue the legacy of Final Destination, and in their efforts, they have actually made a pretty great horror comedy flick. Hi, I'm Joe from Create Context. This is the Weekly Movie Minute. Today we are talking about Final Destination Bloodlines, directed by Adam Stein and Zach Lipovsky. Final Destination Bloodlines opens like every other film in the Final Destination franchise with an elaborate Rube Goldberg-type death machine. This setting, though, is a period piece, a towering restaurant named Skyview on their opening night in 1968. Iris Campbell attends the opening with her soon-to-be fiancé Paul, and through a series of mishaps and lackadaisically tossed pennies, the entire restaurant goes up in flames before crashing to the city streets below. Iris sees all this through a premonition and is able to actually avert the crisis, saving hundreds of lives and shutting down the hastily made restaurant for good. This story quickly then picks up in the present day, 50-some years after the incident that never occurred, as Iris's granddaughter Stephanie becomes plagued by dreams of the same vision her grandmother had so many years ago. What Stephanie discovers through her grandmother is that even though Iris saved all those lives, death slowly started coming for each survivor, one by one, and their families, the families that were never meant to be born. Right off the bat, this film opens with a visually stunning death sequence. The Final Destination series is known for these elaborate premonition openings, from the iconic car pileup scene from 2 or the gory 3D stock car race from The Final Destination, which is actually the 4th film in the series, not the final as the name would suggest. Each sequence has their own charms and fan favorites. I'm personally fond of James Wong's roller coaster sequence in the 3rd film, but none of them look as technically interesting or fear-inducing as this new one. This death sequence starts when a glass dance floor, hundreds of stories in the air, starts to break, leaving dancers to fall to their doom on the pavement below. This is followed by huge explosions, falling pianos, and a truly gnarly elevator death. This scene is filled with callbacks to the franchise, but still feels tonally unique and may possibly be the best death opening sequence in the entire franchise. Once we get into the plot proper, it becomes clear that writers Guy Busick and Laurie Evans Taylor have learned from the past mistakes of the series. Final Destination has always been a series that took itself just a little too seriously. Guy has worked on the fantastic script for Ready or Not, as well as the latest Scream sequels. John Watts, director of the MCU Spider-Man trilogy, is also given a story credit here, and that sense of magical realism is on full display with Bloodlines. Rather than heady, brooding dialogue about death and the inevitability of terror lurking around every corner, these writers approach the story with a sense of humor that was painfully missing from earlier entries. Yes, these are movies with bigger themes about the uncontrollable nature of death, but they are also flicks where people get burned alive in tanning beds, disemboweled by swimming pools, and beheaded by lawnmowers. The writing reflects the absurdity of what's happening on screen, with characters who understand exactly what type of movie they are in. And this is probably the biggest redemption for the Final Destination series. It feels like this film is the first one to truly know what kind of movie it is. There are several perfectly planned needle drops that align excellently with the carnage on screen, and this film contains an insane MRI machine kill that may be my favorite on-screen death in the series. Even the trailers for this film contain a ton of fake-out deaths, so the audience isn't too spoiled by the numerous happenstance one-off deaths that take place during the film. This was such a smart marketing idea, and it keeps the film tense throughout because we never know when the next death might strike. There's also a great little exposition to Tony Todd's character from the original two films. His appearance here is not only a nice little backstory to the creeping, brooding character we met earlier in the series, but it also acts as a sweet send-off to one of the great horror character actors of the past 40 years. I was worried the series might not do his character justice, but my fears were quickly assuaged after his brief on-screen appearance. Final Destination Bloodlines is a great little horror flick that takes a ridiculous franchise and gives it the cheeky, fun-loving reboot that it needed to stay relevant. This series has gone through numerous highs and lows, but mostly lows. Thankfully, Bloodlines is one of the highest points in the series. I usually give recommendations for flicks that are similar, but I thought instead it might be fun to rank the Final Destination films how I see them. If you've never seen any of these movies before and you're a fan of horror flicks, I would say they are definitely worth your time, but to know that these films do feel painfully dated. There's a distinct early 2000s era of films that just immediately places a movie, and all of these movies contain that aesthetic, whether it's the clothing or cell phones that happen to flip open. Each film feels just kind of like a relic of its time. I should start out by saying that Bloodlines is easily, in my opinion, the best in the series. Maybe that's just recency bias talking, but I've seen all of these flicks multiple times, most of them in the theater, and this one is the most fun I've had watching a Final Destination movie. It's not a perfect film. Some of the acting feels a bit forced, and the movie does abandon its themes of generational trauma and mental illness pretty quickly, but all in all, Bloodlines is the best flick in the series. With that out of the way, going to the other end, starting at the bottom, is The Final Destination. This film came out in 2009, was directed by David R. Ellis, and was originally shot in 3D. 3D flicks kind of immediately have a terrible quality to them outside of the theater-going experience. There are numerous kills that were meant for that format that just do not translate well to the standard viewing experience at home. This movie opens with a premonition at a stock car racing event, and while it is an interesting concept, it's executed the poorest out of any film in the series. The group of survivors here are also the least interesting of any group in the franchise, with most of us actively rooting for their demise instead of tensely waiting to see how they are killed. Next, right above that, would be Final Destination 5. Final Destination 5 is a backdoor prequel to the entire series and ends with the survivors of this film boarding Flight 180, the soon-to-explode plane from the first movie. It's a cheeky little ending that brings the series full circle, but ultimately it just feels like a cheap gimmick that lessens the impact of the original movie. Above that, I would put Final Destination 2. This one is a fan favorite, mainly because of the fear-inducing log truck incident, but outside of that, this movie doesn't have a ton going for it. Ali Larter is back in this movie as Clear Rivers, an absolutely terrible movie name, and she acts as kind of the sage for this new group of survivors. Where this movie does shine is with its interesting twist on the death formula and the lore of Final Destination. The first film ended with everyone, sans clear, being killed according to death's plan, but Final Destination 2 is the only movie where a character actually does cheat death. This film's main protagonist, Kimberly Corman, played by A.J. Cook, successfully stays alive by drowning and then quickly being revived. It's an interesting notion that is again used in this latest film, Bloodlines, and is one of the only logical conclusions these kids could make while trying to escape death. Next would be the first movie, Final Destination. This movie released in 2000 and starred Devon Sawa, Ali Larter, Kerr Smith, and Sean William Scott. Despite its interesting premise, this film played a little too grounded to fully make use of the series' silly premise. This movie is played entirely straight, and it's actually really easy to see the X-Files inspiration in this first flick. It plays closer to a police procedural than any of the other films, but it does have the benefit of a strong cast that the audience is actually rooting for their survival. And lastly, right below Bloodlines, I'd rank Final Destination 3. This may be controversial as it isn't one of the fan favorites, but I think this movie understands the formula better than most of the series' other entries. This film marked the return of James Wan as director, and he really went for it with this film. The premonition kill of a roller coaster ride is kind of inspired, and the tanning bed kill where that shot turns into the coffins is one of the biggest gasp moments in the franchise. This movie also dives into deeper issues like the need for control and how impossible it is for us to decide our own fates. It's the exact type of theme that works perfectly with this formula, and even though it isn't executed to perfection, it adds that small layer of subtext that's missing from most of the other entries. Thank you guys so much for hanging out the Weekly Movie Minute. Again, I'm Joe from Create Context. If you like this, please give us a like, a subscribe. That would be super cool, and I'll see you guys next time.